Hello, welcome to Trinity Church in Port Alberni. I'm so glad you're here. Come with me, let's go and sit down. Here we go. Let's go inside the church. Oh, have I got some good news for you? Yes, the gospel, it means good news. And this week, I think we'll find together that the readings are very good news indeed. So excited to come and tell you all about this. I'll just adjust my camera a little bit. So I'm going to read it to you and it's going to seem a little bit familiar because what I've done is I've taken last week's gospel reading and this week's gospel readings and put them together because really you can have one without the other because we did and the lectionary does. But really to understand really clearly what Jesus is telling us and tell it and understand it in a way that we know that this is actually really good news, I'm going to put them together. So I'm going to read to you now and I'm going to begin at Matthew 13, verse 24. Let's do it. Jesus put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from? He answered, An enemy has done this. The slave said to him, Then do you want us to go and gather them? But he replied, No, for in the gathering of the weeds you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time I will tell the reapers, Collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and the disciples approached him saying, Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field. He answered, The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. And the good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of this age, and the reapers are angels. Just as weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers. And they will throw them into the furnace of fire where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let anyone with ears listen. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid, and then in his joy goes and sells all he has and buys the field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, and on finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down and put the good into baskets, but threw out the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous, and throw them into the furnace of fire where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all this? They answered, Yes. And he said to them, Therefore, every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the master of the household, who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. Here ends the reading. So longer than usual gospel reading, but hopefully it's worth it. So I joined last week's, when I wasn't here, to this week's. I say I wasn't here, but I did video my sermon from last week. And if you watched it on YouTube or Facebook, you might think to yourself, oh, some of what she's saying is familiar. Yes, it is, because it was good news last week, and this week, because I've joined in all of those pieces of the jigsaw together, all these other parables, then we get a more complete picture, and it's even more clear that this is really good news for us. So the sermon, I was talking about all these little pieces of a jigsaw, and you can't really get a full picture with one piece of a jigsaw, can you? If you're making a jigsaw puzzle, you need all the pieces together to help you understand the picture. And you might have noticed that each of the parables that I've just read to you begin, the kingdom of heaven is like. So all of these parables given a little piece, which together helps us to understand that which is really indescribable, the kingdom of heaven. And it does this by relating images of familiar things to help us understand something that isn't really very easy to get your head around. So first of all, we're going to return to last week's parable and also the explanation. Like I said, if you watched last week's video, some of this will be familiar to you. Because in many ways, the other mini parables feed into and qualify the meaning of the main parable, the wheat and weeds. So that parable itself sounds innocuous enough. You could say it almost sounds like a practical lesson in arable farming. It's Jesus' explanation of the parable that's terrifying. The interpretation made by some commentators is bleak. This is my Google of the week, and this is how that reading is often interpreted, and these words are taken from my Google search. It says, sinners will be cast into a fiery furnace at the end of the age, which symbolizes separation from God. There will be eternal suffering for wrongdoers. The rejection of God leads to perpetual anguish and despair. This is not looking good. So I completely understand, and I get it completely, why we humans love to think that those who have wronged us or those who do terrible and unspeakable things in the world would end up suffering eternal anguish as a punishment. Nice idea, eh? But unfortunately, there are a couple of problems with that delicious fantasy. First of all, we know really that such thinking is beneath us. And if it's beneath us, it's most certainly beneath a God who we know to be love. John's first letter puts this quite clearly. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. And the second problem is that we are all sinners and we are all evildoers. We can't seem to help ourselves. You'll remember 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had a passage from Paul's letter to the Romans which said, I do not understand what I do, but what I hate, I do. And if I do what I do not want to do, it's no longer I who do it, but sin living in me. Hold that thought. Now, if St. Paul, the Apostle Paul, can't control those impulses to do sinful things, what chance do we have? You see, although we enjoy a fantasy of imagining that the person who has hurt us getting what we think they deserve, eternal anguish and suffering, the chances are that there is someone out there thinking the same thing about us. Someone we have knowingly or unknowingly hurt or offended by our words, our deeds, our actions, our lack of care. So is there any hope, really, for any of us? Well, yes, there is. And some of the reasons for this hope are right in front of us in the parable of the wheat and the weeds, which, as I said, is really good news. It's even there in the opening words of the parable, which said the kingdom of heaven is like, in this case, like someone who sowed good seed in his field. This tells us something. The purpose of the parable is not to give us information about the exact fate of people who fall into the either-or categories of good, bad, righteous, evil, whatever. It's not about that. The purpose of the parable is to give us a picture of what the kingdom of heaven is like, and principally of what the sower, which we're told is a son of man, is like. And it makes it relatable to everyday experience. Now, the danger comes when we mistake one piece of the jigsaw for the whole thing, and this one piece alone can lead us to a wrongful conclusion, just as my Google search suggested. And I'm going to come back to that more thoroughly in a minute. So what we're actually given, and Matthew has very carefully made sure that he's put all of these parables together, because together they tell us more wholesomely, or holistically, I should say, what the kingdom of heaven is like. And they temper and inform each other, and together lead us to that clearer picture of the kingdom of heaven. So what do we have? The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. That's the field again. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants, and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches. So we already know, because Jesus has explained this, that the sower is Jesus and the field is the world. He was quite clear about that in the parable of the wheat and the weeds. The small seed growing into a massive tree is reminiscent of Ezekiel 17:23, which says this: "On the mountain heights of Israel, I will plant it. It will produce branches and bear fruit and become a splendid cedar. Birds of every kind will nest in it. They will find shelter in the shade of its branches." So a very similar analogy to ours. And in Daniel 4, "Behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong. Its height reached towards the heavens, and it could be seen to all the ends of the earth. Its leaves lovely, its fruit abundant, and in it food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it. The birds of the heavens dwelt in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it." So this is a vision of a great king with dominion over all the earth. And our parable is like it. And we know, don't we, that Jesus often uses images that come from the Old Testament, because, of course, most of his followers would have known all of these Old Testament scriptures. So what we see in this parable, our parable for today, also shows birds of all kinds flocking to this great tree that grew from the mustard seed. Jesus was a small seed in this life, and then became a great king, king of the kingdom of heaven, and people of all nations, cultures, status, types, and all can find a home in him. And the next parable is very similar. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into a large quantity of flour until it worked through all the dough. Slightly different translation than the one I read you there, but the same thing. And the interpretation of this is also quite similar. It shows then how something can be apparently small but can have a huge impact. Yes, the kingdom of heaven is like that too. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field, a field again. Again, we know that the man is Jesus and the field is the world. So then his people are the treasure that he found in the world, and gave or sacrificed everything, including his life, to own the world and rescue his treasured people. Similarly, the kingdom of heaven is like a net. I like this one. A net that was let down into the lake or the sea and caught all kinds of fish. The fishermen sat down and collected the good fish in baskets, but threw the bad away. Now, this one comes round again to be like the parable of the weeds and the wheat. At the end, it says, this is how it will be at the end of the age. Same as the other one, remember. The angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them in the blazing furnace. Same again, remember. Where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Again, remember. So what all of this together tells us is that the kingdom of heaven is a place with a great king who starts humbly but becomes great. A place where all are invited to make their home. This is good news, eh? A place where all can be nourished and fed and treasured by their maker. So that traditional interpretation of the parable of the wheat and the weeds, which is echoed in the parable of the net, is not only at odds with the understanding that God is love, it's also at odds with the descriptions of the kingdom of heaven in these other parables. I mean, if it's all about the wicked being burnt up and eternal anguish and suffering, why are these together? Because that's a different story. Now, if you want to know more about an explanation that fits better with all those other parables, watch last week's sermon. Like I said, part of it I'm giving to you today, but there are details in that sermon from last week which I'm not bringing to you today, and that's maybe what you would, if you're still not sure what I'm talking about, go back to that one. It's got more detail. But what I want to do this week is just focus on that tricky ending, the bit that I propose has been misinterpreted in the past. At harvest time, I will tell the reapers, collect the weeds first, to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. And Jesus' explanation, just as the weeds are burned by fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The angels will collect out of the kingdom, or the world, or chaos if it's the sea, because the same thing in the parable of the net and the understanding of the sea was that was the place of chaos and danger. All causes of sin and evildoers will be taken out, and then they will be thrown into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus says the fire will burn up causes of sin and the wicked evildoers in the fiery furnace. Now, the Greek word for furnace can imply judgment, but it also implies purification, like ore, which is purified into pure metal by going into a furnace. Now, if you notice, you can pause me and get your Bible out if you haven't got it in front of you now, but you will notice that nowhere does this parable or any other parable in this section that we've read imply there will be eternal anguish. Nowhere does it say that. As a punishment for sin, this is not there. So I don't know why Google thinks it is. What it does say is causes of sin will be burned up. And I'm also suspicious of that translation which says evildoers or the wicked will be burned up. So the Greek word that's used there and translated as evildoers or sinful people or the wicked, in some translation is used like a plural noun, like evildoers, that word. But actually it's not a noun at all, it's an adjective. Now, there isn't a noun there, and in the absence of the noun in the sentence, the word could just as well indicate a state of wickedness as much as it could label individuals as wicked people in that black or white way. You're either righteous or you're wicked. Doesn't this just as likely echo the feeling that something of the sinful nature resides in all of us, that Paul lamented about? That it's sin living in him that makes him do these things he really doesn't want to do. Now, this means that the parable tells us that in the kingdom of heaven, at the end of the age, all causes of sin and all the evil or wicked things that we currently struggle with will be taken away from us, burned up as thoroughly as something tossed into a furnace, thereby purifying us so that we shine like the sun in the kingdom of God. Just as ore thrown into the furnace, they burn away all the stuff, the nasty stuff, leaving a lump of metal that's shining like the sun. These words are taken from Jesus' words in verse 43. So thinking of all this, so I've been away visiting friends for the last 5 days or so, and one of my friends, the one that gave me a bed to sleep in, has just had a pacemaker fitted. And she was talking about it, and she's not able to move her left arm very much currently because the things that they shoved into her heart from the pacemaker to make it work, time has to be taken for the flesh of the heart to grow around the ends of the pacemaker to make it firm in her. So it's not likely to come loose. And when I was thinking about this, I'm thinking this is it. This is the parable of the wheat and the weeds. This is why Jesus says, and I don't know if I've written it down properly, but Jesus says when that the wheat will be uprooted with the weeds if the servants of the master try to uproot the weeds, and like I said, my other sermon explains in more detail what those weeds are. But if they've rooted those evil things are rooted in our own hearts, as Paul suggested that they are. If you try to pull up the weeds, yeah, of course it's going to uproot or damage the wheat. Of course it is, because they're inseparable in this age. Wait till the end of the age. So you might say to me, I've digressed a little bit, but you might say to me, or maybe you've been thinking, in both the parable of the wheat and the weeds and the parable of the net, it says there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, doesn't that represent eternal suffering and anguish? Well, two things there. First of all, weeping means sadness or frustration. Gnashing of teeth indicates anger, fury, or anguish. But where does it say anything about this lasting forever? And where does it say who will be weeping and gnashing their teeth, even if it does mean all of these things? Yes, it could apply to those whose evil fruits so consume them that there is nothing left after the burning. You know, there are people in this world, we don't know these individuals who are in power perhaps, or individuals that we hear about on the news or other stories that come to us, and they just seem so bad that there can't possibly be anything good. But if our sins, the causes of sins and the wicked in us will be burned away at the end of the age, then there might be a little bit of good left over in everybody. Maybe not. Maybe somebody was asking me if I was advocating universalism, and I'm not, because there might be some people who are so evil through and through, have turned away from God so utterly and completely that there is nothing left after the burning, and maybe they're weeping and gnashing their teeth. But couldn't that also apply, and even more so, to the one who scatters the evil in the world, the one who sowed the weeds in the first place? The devil, who found out that in the end all he planted and all he cultivated in the world came to nothing and is utterly consumed. And if this is right, the parable of the wheat and the weeds shouldn't terrify us or anyone. It should fill us with joy and hope as a picture of the kingdom of heaven, alongside all the other pictures offered in these parables, where the king and the kingdom grow, and we are offered a home and a welcome. Everybody is offered the same thing. Everyone is invited to accept all that Jesus offers us and did for us by his life, death, and resurrection. I think it was Nelson Mandela or somebody who said, we might be surprised who we find is in heaven. And this is where the good news comes. And so I've spoken in the name of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Well, there we go. I hope I've convinced you that this parable is good news, amongst all the other good news that is the gospel. So it would also be good news for me, and my heart would be happy if you were to come and worship with us for the first time in this church building. But I know that's not for everyone. But I'm here, and if you would like to make contact or ask questions or just get to know us from afar, then please go onto our website or give the office number a call. We'd be delighted to hear from you. Okay, God bless. And I hope that, I was going to say that I see you, but at least that you see me again next Sunday. Until then, be safe. Bye for now.